after a couple of weeks break, pardon me, that was a real. By the way, something's got a mistake. We are back once more. This is a GMS, a magazine podcast, and so play we all. And this is a podcast all about board games, role playing games, and the people who make them. And I am, as usual, a very, very much in pain, Paco Garcia.
Yeah, well, this is Chris from DSX Machina, and when we're not that old, we should be able to like. My wife is in incredible poor shape and so much. I'm like, honey, you're young, you're beautiful. Like, come on, let's stay in shape. But
Well, unfortunately, my genes have only blessed me with good looks, but not necessarily with good body.
can't
Um,
have both, eh?
no, no, not at all. I am, as I always say, I am very well made, um, but not very well assembled because I have issues with my bones that can do things like
Oh
that
yeah.
all over, all over. Oh, content warning, bones cracking. And I have a back problem called degenerative spondylosis, which means that the kind of the cushion between my vertebrae are getting smaller and smaller as I get older and older. And since I'm not going to be getting any younger, that's only going to get worse. So whenever my back, right now, I have lost already 2 centimeters in height.
Oh wow.
I used to be 180 when I was younger. I am 178 centimeters. And now the problem is that as they can become closer and closer, if you move your back or you put your back in the wrong position for long, nerves can get trapped and the cushions can get displaced and it becomes very, very painful. So you have to go to hospital and you need to get a needle in your back like that. And then they pump you with chemicals. So they numb you. And then for a week, you either have to be completely still like that, looking up to the ceiling, which is not fun because you get very bored very quickly. And it makes you, the first thing that happens when you have to be in bed like that for a while is you start to think about how am I going to put the television on the ceiling?
Like in dentist offices.
Yeah, or how am I going to keep my laptop like that so I can actually type and do things whilst I'm here? And they keep pumping you with things like diazepam for a week and giving you more injections like until you are fit for purpose once more. And it's not fun. And I had one of those attacks on Sunday, so I had to go to hospital and be nearly put down because the drugs they gave me, they made me very drowsy. So
Oh wow.
Thank God I couldn't drive anyway. Otherwise, I could have been a real danger. So welcome to my life.
Well, I can do this. I can.
Okay.
I have a double jointed thumb, so it's about the same.
That's okay. Can you do this and put your thumb 90 degrees back?
Yep.
No, you can't. No, that's not. Come on, that's nothing. Humans, for those of you who are listening and not watching, Chris cannot do what I am doing right now. Not a chance in hell he's doing what I'm doing right now.
No, yeah, I can do it quite a bit, but not a 90.
Not that much.
But like I said, I can.
I can show you something very freaky. I'll show you something freaky. Shall I?
Okay.
Okay. Look in here.
Okay.
Look, and I can detach the fingers like half a centimeter.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. All I can do, I can dislocate my thumb, so you can see the thumb and then plop.
Oh yes, that's fun. That would get you out of handcuffs, so you can get arrested now and escape.
Exactly. Well, thankfully, I haven't exercised that skill.
You haven't?
In the realm of gaming, I got an interesting question. To those people who can see, look at my background. Right, you can see this.
Yeah.
This is an illustration.
Yes.
From my artist Nick Greenwood for Amethyst Revelations, which is coming out this week. By the time you post this, it may already be out, and it's up for sale. And this is an example. What I talk about is the possible ethical use of generative AI.
Okay.
Now, you'll probably think, I'll say that 30% of this image is generated. Now, you probably understand what that means. So this is the Sand Sea. It's a mini campaign world in Amethyst. There's a whole section of this world, which is a desert that operates like water, so vehicles can travel along it. There are sand dolphins, sand octopus. Basically, it's just everything but in the sand. It's a desert. There are islands and so forth. And so Nick Greenwood drew this amazing illustration of a vehicle in the Sand Sea, and it looked so wonderful the way it expanded across that I thought it would be really cool if it was a 2-page spread. You can see it. Imagine the middle of the page right about here.
Yeah.
And then this image would have a little bit of text, and then most of the text would be on this side. But it was a wonderful 2-page ambient spread. The problem, however, is that the image didn't do that. In fact, the image ends right about there.
Okay.
So all of this is Nick, but it ends about there. So I was like, Nick, wouldn't it be awesome if we had a 2-page spread and we had this image taking it from one page to the other? He said that would be cool, except the image ends here. So I thought, instead of you having to waste time just painting this desert, there are programs, including part of Photoshop and others, that will can zoom out. There are zoom out features where you can zoom out a photo and it'll kind of determine what it thinks the rest of that image should be. Well, it works for artwork as well, but instead of zooming out, we zoomed out from one direction. So from at a certain point, this image goes from Nick to a generated image. And the generated image, I actually asked people, and they were able to determine, and some of them were able to figure out it's about there. So this is all Nick. This is computer. Now, someone will say, some people will declare that to be unethical because this illustration has generative content. But seriously, what is really like I said, everyone's staring at this. This is Nick's illustration. All it did was just extend this desert off in one direction, right? And this is something I approached Nick and said, hey, Nick, do you want to do this or do you want to draw it yourself? And he was just like, oh, for the love of God, just have the computer because this is boring. Like no one wants to spend time just extending a desert off. This is much more interesting to draw. So I gave Nick the option. He said, no, we'll do the generated because it's way easier. And so this is one of those things where, like I said, this doesn't use Midjourney. This uses, as you can imagine, an ethical training model. And all it's doing is extrapolating Nick's image and then extending it off. So my conscience is relatively clear on this because all we've done is extend a desert off 3 or 4 inches. But from a technical perspective, 30% of this illustration is generated.
Okay, a couple of considerations in there. When you say that it's ethically trained, how do you get to that?
Well, because some of these programs like Photoshop don't use people's work without permission.
No, that's not strictly true.
But even beyond that, this is not something where we can where we can say, like, once again, when we talk about the means and way we get there, this comes into the knee-jerk hatred for AI in general. And there are people that will just hate the fact that we even employed a computer to create this image. Okay. And I'm a person that subscribes to the fact that this is yet another type of technology, and I don't have an issue with my artist endorsing the idea of filling in this little piece with an AI.
Okay, a couple of things. Firstly, Adobe did not ask permission. Adobe assumed that they could use the images that people were contributing to their library and made an opt-out clause into their contracts.
Yeah.
After Firefly was started to be trained. So
yeah, this wasn't used for Photoshop, mind you. It was another program.
Wait a second. So from that point of view, no, Firefly is not as unethical as other apps, but it's not particularly ethical either. Secondly, it has transpired, as in a couple of days ago, 3, that Firefly used Midjourney generated images to be trained. So that is kind of murky because, to be perfectly honest, I think it's better that they use Mid-Journey images to be trained because Mid-Journey images are copyright free. So they are not stealing directly, but I mean, in the sense, in the
Some may
sense,
say it's like 2 degrees of separation doesn't necessarily make it good.
exactly. So, so I find it funny. At the very least, I find funny that okay, you have generated, images with work you didn't ask permission to do. So screw you! I'm going to take your work that you have generated using those images to do whatever the bloody hell I want with it. I
Yes.
find some sort of irony in there. So it's not really as ethical. And whether we like it or not, Photoshop kind of intelligent tools that they use now, these generative zooming out and all whatever, that's based on Firefly 2. Let's not forget that. This is not a
Yeah.
separate technology that's been trained on anything else.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think right now, unless you create your own LoRa, there is no ethical use of AI from that point of view.
And that's where I'll disagree. Its program is called Mitsua Diffusion. It's on Hugging Face. Right now, this is being, a lot of people have been pointing to this for those people who are having issues with Firefly and other programs.
Mhm.
And it is an entirely private, independent. It was done by one guy. So Hugging Face, for those people who don't know, is basically a giant repository of people who are creating their own AI models to do various things. And it's not generative just AI. It's just people using logarithmic stuff and training models to do a variety of things. Um, there are ones that I can say were probably a little skittish, but the one that everyone points at, which has been getting a lot of attention recently, is called Mitsua, and it is trained entirely off of, and he did it entirely himself from public domain and copyrighted images in which he had gotten personal permission. It is an entirely independent training model.
Okay.
Now, as a result, it does not produce photorealistic images like the current version of Midjourney does. But and then as I did my video last 2 weeks ago on why my opinions on AI is nuanced, and it traces back to my general fascination with technology in general, and it comes down to things like Civic AI, which is a repository of tens of thousands of, I won't say tens of thousands, I think definitely thousands of models and training systems that people have made on their own. And for the people who don't know, you can download stable diffusion base models and then load in the training models that you wish to use. So you can choose which models you wish to use with the system. And you can run programs like Comfy UI and run the entire thing locally on your own PC. So, so
let me just see there for a
wait,
second.
you have a portfolio of your own artwork. You can train it independently on your own server and not have it be leased out or leached out
Okay,
by
let me add something there, because I am a big massive proponent of that, huge, because I think is I was going to make a very saucy kind of comparison, but I am not going to do it. It is the only possible way to create generative images and be 100% certain that it is safe.
Yeah.
The only way. There is something, and also this is something that artists should start considering. And again, I will probably get lambasted for saying this, but there is something called LoRa. A LoRa is when you take your work, put it into a machine, like I think we have spoken about this in the past. You are, I don't know, Todd Lockwood, who is one of my favorite artists ever, and you put his thousands of paintings into one AI, and feed that AI with copyright-free images, and train that AI to create images that are indistinguishable from those of Todd Lockwood. And Todd Lockwood, who's done that by himself, can say, here you are, gaming studio. I'm authorizing you to create artwork that looks like mine for this fee and for this period of time. And after that, you won't be allowed to do that. And if you want to create more artwork later on, you have to pay me. And he could be doing that with 20 different studios. Now, there is a case to be made about how competition could be fair or unfair, because that is going to put a lot of people out of business because of three different things. One, the money that you need to be able to do that, because the equipment you need is going to cost a lot of money. Secondly, the time and expertise that you're going to need to do that, because it's unlikely that you will have all the time to create the thousands of generative examples to get to the point where this is undistinguishable from your art. And thirdly, it puts you at unfair advantage over people who have just started, because they're not going to have enough examples of their work to train an AI efficiently. So
Yeah.
even that has to be thought out carefully, but it is the only way in which an AI, you can be completely safe.
Yeah. And that was something that we were messing with before we like I said, there was a point where Nick and I were mucking around, and yeah, we because Nick actually does have a relatively large library, so we did actually do that. We trained everything off of just his illustrations, and it pointed us in a few interesting directions, and it helped. I guess in the same way that I use ChatGPT to get over writer's block, I guess there's such a thing as illustrator block to get an interesting idea of where to go. But like I said, this is one example. Like there's tons of examples where I've sent Nick an image that we use where it was generated, and he looked at it and said, "Okay, I think I know what you're communicating to me. I can take that illustration as a jumping off point to create something on myself." And that's something else he's done. But once again, that's using AI in the communication system. Going back into the Mitsua, it compared to Midjourney, which I think is something like a couple billion samples it used for training, it's currently sitting at about 11 million. It publicly releases every single data set it uses, so it tells you where it gets everything from, and you can, as I've messed with, you can download the whole thing and then add whatever additional illustrations you wish to add to the training model and go on from there. So it's a very interesting process. So like I said, my general fascination with technology in general, it has always propelled my interest in this. But the other thing I said in my video is that when people talk about how the system is evil, I was talking, and I made a post because there is this one group I go to, which it celebrates these old art books when I was a child, one of the biggest inspirations in life. But people occasionally will post images from AI sources, and they'll say this is an AI image, and then there are people's comments that it's that, no to AI is evil, this is bad, and all that stuff. And then the moderator, so look, we have it in the community notes. We state specifically, if you state publicly that this image is AI generated, you can post it. Stop decrying this, because your posts are just going to get deleted because we're not in the mood to create a storm. And one person just kept on doing it, and I asked him the question. I posted set and said, you know what? The reason why you can't pay bills isn't because this guy's posting an image on Facebook. Your problem has to do with the economy. If you want to solve the problem, solve the people that are using this technology as a means to oppress you. The guy posting an image in this Facebook group isn't the one doing it. And as I said in my video about how my opinion on AI is nuanced, I know ultimately at the end of the day, the fault lies with humanity. It lies with us. We're the fault of it. And I have, like I said, I live in a basement suite. I don't make enough money to really survive. Thankfully, I have a wife and I make enough. We do our best. But at the end of the day, I know the reason why I can't afford a house has nothing to do with artificial intelligence. It deals with the people It deals with our economy. It deals with a massively corporate-run society. And my country, Canada, is falling into economic ruin, and everyone is in denial about it. We probably have, my guess, 4 or 5 years, if not probably a lot less, before we hit another massive economic collapse, similar to what happened with the housing crisis of 2008. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, like I was looking at the housing prices in Spain, and my jaw dropped because the average house in Canada is on the aggregate 75 to 85% more expensive than a house in Spain, and we make 35 to 45% less than you do. And
how you mean you make 45?
So, give you an example. You want to know, like my wife. I'll give an example. My wife makes about $2,500 Canadian, which is about $2,000, about 2,000 euros. So she makes about 2,000 euros a month.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what the average rental price is in my hometown of Prince George? The average price for a 2-bedroom rental suite.
$1,500 or 2,000?
$2,000. So it's $2,000 to rent. For a 1-bedroom is $1,600, and she makes $2,000 a month for a 1-bedroom.
Okay, for what it's worth.
In retrospect, my dad, on a single income, because my mother didn't work, got to pay for 2 vehicles and a house, and this was 40 years ago. So
okay, the things that I know it may not look like it, but in Spain things are very, very similar. Although our average salary apparently is 27,000 euros, most people don't make anywhere near that. I barely make or just over 1,400, and I have my whole salary. My brute salary is 2,300. 23,500 euros a year. For those, I have to take out Social Security, and I have to take out my taxation, which it will leave me with that about 1,400 to 1,500 a month. Depending on where you are in Spain, if you're in Madrid, Barcelona, Bilbao, even Valencia, rental for a 2-bedroom can be anything, depending on where you are, between 700 and 12,000 and 1,200 euros. I know people who just had their salaries, their rental increased, and they're now paying 1,400 euros per month.
Wow.
So I know that it looks a lot better, but believe you me, it's not a lot better. I know, however, that it's true that the price to buy a place in Canada is ridiculous. And if you are in anywhere like Ottawa or somewhere like that, it's just...
Well, yeah, there's a
bonkers.
wonderful TikTok channel where he goes, Canadian real estate versus literal European castles. He's done a series of these, about 30 or 40 of them. Yeah. And so it's one of those situations where the only way Nicole and I are ever going to get a house is through, honestly, it's if we get a massive windfall, or most likely dead man boots. When my mother decides to pass on, we can inherit this house. And if we wish, we can sell it. And our second possibility, in order to try to increase the amount of houses being built, they've just passed a law that allows, back in the old days, in the 70s, 60s, and 80s, houses were put on giant lots. And this is not something you would probably are foreign to this idea, but downtown, like in the city, you would have housing lots of a 1/4 acre. So to give you an idea, you would have a house and you would have a lawn that was 2 or 3 times bigger than the house, and then you'd have a backyard 2 or 3 times bigger than the house. And the house itself would be 2,000, 3,000 square feet. So there's a corner house near where I lived where it's about, I would say, 1/4 acre of grassland around the street. And this is how they did, because they didn't care, because they didn't think anyone would come in. And now houses are so small, they're basically 8 feet away from the other house, where in the old days they'd be 4 or 5 meters. And now they've passed a law that basically makes it permissible to build for that person to build another house and then split their lot in half. And so one of the things we've been contemplating, my wife lives just outside of the city limits, her parents, sorry, and they have 3 acres. on in a lot, and they have one house and 3 acres. It's not a farm. They just own 3 acres of land. So there's been talk about us just building another house on that lot for us.
It wouldn't be a bad thing. Now, I only want to say a couple more things about this topic. One is a suggestion, another one is a question. My suggestion would be there is a third choice, and it's that you could come to Spain, where housing is cheaper, and if you can work remotely, then you would be better off. I'm just going to leave it there.
Trust me, I would love to visit.
Okay,
yes,
I would leave it there. And the second is the question is that how on earth did we get from gaming to AI and then to housing when this podcast has sweet FA to do with housing anything?
Well, luckily, my game I'm reviewing.
Ow.
It deals with
housing crisis.
Yes. Do you want to talk about that, or do you want to talk about something else?
No, I would be delighted. I mean, that is possibly the longest segue into a game review ever recorded. We're going to do Blackout Hong Kong.
So, if you don't know, Blackout Hong Kong is a game by Alexander Pfister. For those people who don't know who Alexander Pfister is, he did quite a variety of games, including Great Western Trail, which is probably one of his most well-known titles. This Blackout Hong Kong is not one of his most well-known titles. In fact, you can get this game relatively cheap because it hasn't been a hugely successful game. And I can see why, but I'll defend it for what it is. The game's premise is that, as you might have shocked out, there is a blackout in Hong Kong, and players are playing as different administrators that are trying to basically recover the city during this crisis. Everyone gets a player board.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone gets a certain number of tokens and cards. It's got a very interesting resource system. So instead of having a token for water, a token for food, a token for batteries and fuel, it instead creates this very interesting wheel on the board. So when you have a certain resource of something, you simply put your cube on the board.
Remember that if you talk from behind your board,
yes, I know,
your voice gets really weird.
So, yes. So if you can see, you put a cube on the resource instead of having a colored, a cube that's you have a specific token that says food. You put one of your colored cubes on food.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why they did this is that you can spend other types of resources to move a cube into another spot. So you can transform your resources relatively easily. So that's the first thing that's interesting. The second are the cards. The way the game works is that you lay down cards face down, and these cards are workers. These workers will offer certain things. They will offer cube resources of a specific color. They can do specific actions, and you place them across the bottom of your board. And you only have 3 spots at the beginning, but you can eventually add another one. And then you reveal them, and you can activate them in whatever order you want. Now, I say colored resources because at the beginning of each round, the primary player rolls 3 colored dice and then places those colored dice on the resources. So that tells you what resources you can get that turn. So you may roll fuel, food, and water, and those are the only resources you can get that day, and they're color-coded. So between red, blue, and yellow. So if you put down a card with a guy that has 3 blue cubes, you put 3 cubes of your color onto where the blue resource die is. And so that's how the game works. You're getting randomized resources depending on your strategy. You use those to purchase better guys. And what you're trying to do is secure the perimeter around regions, which is not too dissimilar from Pandemic. So you basically put down control cubes on this board. And once you've encircled the board, you've claimed that region. And that region allows you to put down a building, which makes you more powerful. So there's a bit of an engine building component. However, the game is very tricky to learn. It took me, like the first time I played it, It was a half an hour of playing the game before I even understood how it played. It's a very tricky game to learn. The idea of laying down cards across this board, activating them, gaining resources based on where the dice are on the resource tracker, then spending those resources to claim these cards, which will then net you points. And then having, and there's also other point strategies. You can't really see it so well, but there's these little missions that if you have, like, not only that, but when you lay down these cards, the cards stay there.
Okay.
This is another very important rule. So the cards stay underneath, and you lay down more cards. And once you have less than 4 cards, you grab the pile that has the most cards, you take them back, and then you add that to your hand. So you're constantly resetting this pile. And if you have a stack that has a certain color combination of cards, you get to do something cool, like take one of these cards, activate a special ability, and so forth. So there's rules on top of that as well. So not only do you have to lay these cards down across, you have to lay them in a very specific order so that when you claim a stack back, you get back the cards you want. So there's a lot to balance, a lot to figure out. And of course, and you get points for basically a lot of things. You get points for controlling, you get points for the cards you've purchased, you get points for resources at the end of the game, you get points for the amount of money that you've acquired, and the person with the most points at the end wins. Pretty straightforward. It is a very interesting mechanic. This is something I actually have to give credit to Fister for designing a game with a mechanic that I have never seen before. I have seen games where you lay down cards face down and then you reveal them. I've seen that. I have seen games where there's area control. I have never seen a game that had randomized resources through a die, and then you get to determine how many resources of each based off the cards you play. I've never seen that before. But the idea that each stack of cards can itself, the combination of colors, activate certain abilities. I've never seen that before. So unlike other games in our collection where I can say like, oh, they took that mechanic from this game. I took this, like we have the next game we're going to be playing is Lost Ruins of Arnak, which is a very, very popular game. But everyone says the common opinion on it is that it doesn't do anything new. It's a game that is very popular, but it's a game that reuses mechanics from 3 or 4 other games. I have one thing I'll say is that I have never seen a game that has this combination of these mechanics before. And some may say, oh, it's from this, but I always tip my hat to any game designer that tries to do something incredibly new. And that's an incredibly new mechanic. The only thing that I can diss on it is that it's not an easy game to learn. Like the first time I played it, I was getting very frustrated because I didn't know what I was doing. Second time I played it, it was a lot easier to learn, a lot easier to play. And I was able to figure it out a lot more. But the only other issue is that it's like so many games that have engine building, because this game has an engine building component, is that the moment your engine gets good, or just before your engine gets good, the game ends. That ends just before you're like, oh my God, I can finally activate this one that'll do all these cool things. And then they're like, yeah, except the game is over. If it only had one more round. And both times I played it, I was frustrated at the fact that, like, you have this cool ass board, you will not activate everything, right? So the ability to allow you to have 6 cards in your hand instead of 4, or being able to activate this 4th pad here, you can do one of those. It is unlikely you'll unlock them both. So you have to decide how you're going to unlock and play the game. I give it a solid 7.5. It's not a bad game. I bet you can get it at least, or Canadian, for less than $40. You okay?
Ow, I just sneezed. That pulls my back. Ow.
Oh, I hate it. It's when you sneeze and you have a bad back. It just goes right through your whole body. But I think the important thing is that you can absolutely get this game inexpensive. It's probably going to be one of the cheapest games Fister's ever made. I bet you can get it for under $40. I bet you if it's in US, you can probably get it for around $30. but it's not an expensive game to get, and that is Blackout Hong Kong.
Okay, that sounds it sounds quite interesting. I wonder if the thing about the speed of the engine building is to do with practice, or is because the engine is slow itself?
Well, I've noticed that with a lot of games. There's a lot of games that I played, even from the original Scythe, where you can never complete, you can never get your engine to 100%. The game, there's another game, I can't remember, it was about building robots, and Nicole and I were thinking of getting it. And when Tom Vassell reviewed it a long time ago, he said the issue with the game is at the moment that the ball gets rolling, the game ends.
Hmm.
And it's a common practice with a lot of engine builders that the engine, you never get your engine never gets to 100%.
I
You're
see.
always denied that, and maybe that's a tactic. We got to play the game again because I want to be able to do everything. And you play the game again, you still can't get everything because the game ends.
That would frustrate me immensely because I want to be able to use the resources I know I'm going to have. Otherwise, why do you give it to me? It's bonkers. It's like having a car with 5 speeds in a road that you can only get up to 4. Why bother?
Yeah.
But okay, well, I have a couple of games. In fact, not just one. I thought I was going to have just one, but I have two because I just remember that I did a review last week. I managed to play with Anastasius from Rhapsody Games a game called Monarchs of Camelot, which is
Monarchs of Camelot.
yes, they tried to crowdfund it a little while ago. It did not succeed, unfortunately, and they're going to come back to crowdfunding to try and see if they can get the funds out of it. They have tightened the rules a bit, so we played a on Tabletop Simulator. Um, like you with Blackout Hong Kong, it took me a while to understand what was happening, but once I did, I I really got into it. My dog is look at that cute doggy. I really got into it. Monarchs of Camelot is a storytelling, resource management, competitive game for up to 4 players, in which it takes place in the Arthurian era. However, it takes place after the death of Arthur.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you are playing the character that you're going to play is one of the contestants to the throne. Each one of them is going to have their own goals, their own ambitions, and their own way to do things. You can get from a paladin to a witch, and each one of them will have a number of powers and a number of resources and a number of goals. In the center of the table, you have a spread with a few locations. And then you get a deck of cards with some chapters, and each chapter is going to be telling you what your goals for that chapter are and what you need to achieve, which is the same that I just said. So, for example, your goal could be to finish with 7 magic points, for example. I'm just inventing it. Or by getting rid of the advisors from the other players. And each location is going to have a different condition that you can use. So, for example, if you are in the court, you can use seduction. But if you are in the dungeon, then you can use your guards more efficiently. The resources are magic points, things like magic points, soldiers, advisors, that sort of thing. And the resources are very, very scarce. So you have to use them very wisely. And in order to do that, you have a hand of 3 cards. Each card has a number of abilities that you can assign to your character. If you lay your card to the left of your character, you're going to have a number of options. And if you lay them to the right, you're going to have different options. In order to trigger those abilities, you have to use your resources. So say that you want to attack somebody, you need to use a soldier. However, once you use your resource, getting it back is not easy. So you have to have a card that when you lay it down, it will give you for free, get your soldiers back, or gain an advisor at the beginning of the round. So as the story unfolds, your character becomes more and more powerful. You can do more and more things to the other players until you either obtain a number of prestige points that will means that you get closer to the crown, or you lose your hit points, so to speak, or you run out of time, for example. The game is a little bit tricky to learn because this idea that once you use a resource, unless you have a card that allows you to recover them, it makes, scarcity is a big thing. The one thing I love though is that the story is really well intertwined with both the characters and the mechanisms. So as you are reading, what you can do each round and what mini objectives you get, they change depending on where you are. So for example, if you are once again in the court and you need to do something with one of the skills that the court allows you to use, say for example that you can use advisors to take a look at somebody else's cards, you have to hurry up and use it there, because if the location changes, that's it, done. You won't be able to do that anymore, and that will make life a little bit harder. The game, in theory, plays in about half an hour per player. Is 2 to 4 players. I think that's a little bit optimistic. Yeah, I was learning it, but it took us about 2 hours to play the first game, the first chapter, and there are a ton of chapters. But the atmosphere of the game is fantastic. Really loved the Arthurian feel to it. It was so good. And once you understand what different strategies you can use with each character to try to win, it adds to the replayability quite a lot. So it leaves you wanting more and more and more. I really enjoy it. Again, once I got to grips with it, it wasn't easy for me to understand exactly what was going on, as Anastasius was explaining what was on the board. But once you get into it, and once you understand that the story really mixes very well with the mechanics, and you begin to pay attention to the story, and you begin to understand why these mechanics are being used now, loved it. Really, really enjoyed it.
Wow. There you go.
I would give this game, again, 7.5 to 8. And I wouldn't give it higher because it's hard to learn. But if it was easy to learn, it would be higher in my accounts. So that's my first game.
Is that a topic for a later episode, talking about people making games that people can understand? Because for me, one of the more annoying aspects of, like, I love learning new games, but I'm always worried when I turn that manual. It's like, am I going to understand this? And in some situations, like with, I remember with Scythe, and I read through the manual twice, and then finally it just clicked, and I understood it. And it's unfortunate how often a game people don't play it that much because of the manual. In fact, I'd say one of my biggest problems when I was designing a game was I think I spent too much time over explaining it, and the manual got really, really big. And there's this happy balance of how can you express these rules in the easiest and in the shortest way possible. Because I think there's 2 problems. You can't explain it properly, and you take too long to explain it. And it gets very frustrating when you have a game that you cannot balance either aspect in manual design.
Well, I am an instructional designer by trade. That's what I do in my day life every
Almost like you
bloody
know what you're talking
day.
about
So
then.
yeah, I will know what I'm talking about when we talk about the topic. Definitely, one we should indeed cover. So, I played another game with my friends last week, and it's a game called Shadow House Masquerade. It's a very tiny little game from Empress 4, and I took this game out. I broke it out because it's a game for 3 to 8 players that plays in about 15 minutes, ages 8 and up. And I have to say, it is accurate in all counts. Truly, you can play up to 8 players because there are enough cards for that. It plays in about 15 minutes, if that, and an 8-year-old will be able to understand it. This is a hidden roles game in which there is a culprit of what we don't know and a number of accomplices depending on how many people are playing. Every player is going to have a number of cards in their hands, and every round they're going to play a card. And each card is going to do something, like give a card or swap a card with another player, or steal a card from the player on your right. And every player has to do the same thing. There are, though, some characters, as in the detective, the sheriff, or the dog, who can call out the culprit. So you can point at a player and say, you are the culprit. And if they are, then they have to show you the card and say, yeah, I am the culprit. But if they aren't, then you're wasting the chance. And maybe another player will call another player and get the point. Because if you call the culprit and you get it right, then you get some points. However, if the culprit is the last card standing, then that player wins and gets the point.
Okay.
The first player to get 3 points wins the game. So you have to do several rounds. This is fantastic fun. My friends, and we were playing 6 at the time, they complained that there is too much randomization because throughout the game, cards are going left, right, and across the table all the time. Of course, when you have a card that says swap a card with another player, you may give them the culprit to them, and they can give you another card. So you're shifting away the blame, you know. So if the next round, say that you have in your hand the detective and the culprit, you can give away the culprit to another player, and the next round you can call on them and say, hey, you're the culprit because I knew you have the card. However, because cards go away, you know, around so much, by the next time you get to call somebody, you may have lost track of where that card is. So they were complaining about being too much of that, whereas I thought that is actually what makes the game fun, because otherwise it would be too easy. And this is
I can
not
see
meant
that.
to be. Yeah, you know, this is you know, the game where you put a few little cups and some seeds or something, and then you know, swap them very quickly, and you have to guess where the coin is.
Yeah, classic cups and balls.
This is it, but with cards and around the table.
And everyone's trying to guess.
Yes, pretty much. So we loved it. It's a very tiny game. It's only a handful of cards. The rules, surprisingly enough, are not badly written. They could do with a few clarifications here and there, like when something must be done by all players or just by 2 players, that sort of thing. And other than that, I am going to give this game a massive 8 because it was really good fun. And I don't give it any higher because its lifespan is not very long. Once you've played this game 4 or 5 times, you want to go on to the next one.
Yeah. I think I've had an Empress S4. I've had several Empress S4 games. They make quite delightful, and this is, I can say, They make very delightful, small box, portable, quick games that you play once and never want to play again.
Well, it happened to us with World Splitters. But I have to say, with World Splitters, the reason that we put it away is because the rules were really, really badly written.
Oh, that's
So
good.
we struggle so much to get to grips with the game that we just didn't want to keep trying anymore. But it was a very interesting game in which you have to fence your territory. You have to split the world and score points depending on how big the territory that you were actually fencing is. It felt that it had to be a lot better than the rules made it look like.
Also, Empress S4, a very well-known Chinese company.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they're very good people. Actually, I have met them at Spiel twice. I've always had some really great conversations with them. They are utterly adorable, and I like them.
That was a snide little joke because we were just having a conversation about the fact that they're based out of Taiwan.
I know, and that's why I'm not going into it.
I was trying to bait you there to see
No, not gonna happen. I'm just interested in the people behind, and the people behind this Empress for are just fantastic human beings. So that's all I care about. So Shadow House Masquerade, if you're looking for a hidden role kind of quick party game, this is a winner. You really have to try.
That's
And that's
fantastic.
it. And actually, about the topic that we were talking regarding, you know, rules well explained, I will have another game to review because of that, which is My Singing Monsters.
Was it
My Singing Monsters?
Mice and Monsters?
No, My Singing Monsters.
Oh, My Singing Monsters.
What did I say?
I thought there was mice involved.
No, My Singing.
My Singing.
Look, this is going to go through
Like singing.
Yeah.
My Singing Monster. Yeah.
This video is going to go through Adobe Premiere's speech recognition system. If Adobe Premiere understood me when I said my singing, and you heard me mice inging, you need to go to the doctor.
No. I probably need to go to the doctor anyway.
I'm just gonna leave it there because your hearing or my accent completely and utterly sucks. So there you go. That's all I have for today because I've played just my singing monsters, and I want to talk about that game precisely because of the rules and because of the game development itself at a later date.
The hilarious thing, and this is a conversation about language in general. So one of the reasons why my wife and I got together is that I came into the lunchroom of my job and she was drinking something. I asked, this is when we didn't really know each other. I asked what she was drinking, and she said she was drinking hot iced tea. And I, of course, went to her, like, isn't that just tea? And everyone had a bit of a laugh. And then she's like, no, it's hot iced tea. I was like, no, that's just tea. Hot iced tea is just tea because tea by default is hot. And of course, what she was trying to explain is that she had instant iced tea mix, which she then put in the microwave to make it hot. So, but that wasn't the point. But it was the source of mockery of me making fun of the fact that she said hot iced tea.
Well, she could have also meant that it was tea made out of chilies. And therefore it was hot.
Yes. But it was hot iced tea. And then this happened recently where she said that she went to the dollar that the dollar store. Okay. She went to this place, and I said, "Where did you go?" I went to this place, and it's like, "Oh, I've never heard of this store before." And she said, "It's like a dollar store, but it's more expensive." And I said, "Isn't that just a store?" And she said, "We're not getting into this topic again." said it was a dollar store, but more expensive. And I was just like, that's just the store.
Well, I can see where that would be going, and yeah, I can see why she'd say no.
Yes. And then she
No.
told me to shut up. We're not going into that
No,
again.
no,
But
no,
that's
not
just
again.
but yes, so anyway, that's all I got for today.
And so do I, because I am also in desperate need of getting my Robaxing, which is the tranquilizer I'm eating right now for dinner, and head to bed. So hopefully tomorrow I can be half a decent human being once more.
Yes. And for those people who do listen, like I said, we just put out we're putting out two products this week. One is the Foundry virtual tabletop module for Ultra Modern 5. The early access retail release has finally gone live. You can purchase it now. And Amethyst Revelations, the third book in the Amethyst saga. I have finished layout. I got all the artwork from Nick. Guess how many pages this book is?
757,000.
You want to bring that quote down a little bit?
Okay. I'm going to say it's going to be in over 500 and under 650.
Okay, well, it's not. It's 440 pages.
Oh, damn it.
I thought you would go low. How many people? How many? I gotta give you a lecture to show my RPG collection to see how many games have been released that are in excess of 400 pages. I think Pathfinder Core Book 1 is the only RPG I've ever owned in my life that was in excess of 400 pages.
I own too many to remember, believe me. And whenever people tell me about RPGs and they say, "Oh, I'm releasing this RPG, it's 500 pages," and I say, "I am 500 less interested now, 500 times less interested now. Don't give me a game that is over 250 or 300 pages, for the love of God. Don't. I don't have time to read that much. I have to be incredibly interested in your game if I am ever going to read 400 or 500 pages. Is way too much."
But okay.
So
that means you're telling me I have to then make my next book has to be 5. Well, I think personally, if the next Amethyst book, and there's only going to be 4 in the Amethyst series. This is the third one's coming out. There's only going to be 4. That one, most likely, because of that fact, will most likely probably be the biggest one of all of them because there's so much to deal with.
Well, fair enough. I would reconsider making 2 books instead of 1, but who am I to tell? Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you very much, everyone, including humans, for having been listening. It is, as always,
we do not, but we're not prejudiced against our AI overlords. So if you are a robot and you want to comment in the say who you are. Say I am a robot and I do support this channel.
Okay. If you are listening rather than watching to this podcast, I'm looking weird at the camera. Anyway, get in touch. I am still on Twitter, which I will forever call it Twitter, even if you people start calling it X for reasons I don't understand. I will call it Twitter as at GMS Magazine. I am also on Blue Sky and on Threads. I am on Instagram, which I barely ever use. And I am on TikTok as well, and on Facebook. And I would love to hear from you, and you can email me on podcast@gmsmagazine.com.
And this is Chris from Deus Ex Machina. You can find us on all relevant social media channels, which means Facebook and TikTok, yeah. and in Instagram. I am not on X. I also, one more thing. I did a video recently, and this is going to be another topic for the future, where I adapted the video game Remnant to 5th edition. It was a very interesting experiment. Next episode, which will be going up probably next Sunday, it's a live channel. I'm going to be doing Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 is currently one of the biggest games in the world. It is taking the world by storm. Have you heard of this game?
Nope.
It is. Did you ever watch Starship Troopers, the movie Starship Troopers from the 90s?
Yes.
It is a game version of that, where it mocks fascist culture. It's and it involves it definitely is very much a tongue-in-cheek, playful adaptation of the feature film Starship Troopers without having the license.
Well, we can talk about that another time, because really talking about it on the last few seconds of the show is just probably not the right place. So,
Yeah.
humans, thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.